So this is another one of those videos where I am pissed. Apparently, our president has literally put up a hit list against certain protesters because the orange child can't stay off Twitter for more than 10 minutes, except for the times that he's hiding in a bunker. If you haven't seen what I'm talking about, we're about to get into it. Let's go. So, the original plan when I made this channel was to just talk about religion, atheism, and philosophy. As many of you know, that plan failed horribly. But why is that? Why is it that that plan failed so spectacularly for me? Well, I happen to make my channel during one of the most turbulent times in recent history, so I guess we're talking about that before I can get to any of the shit that I actually want to talk about. So what has the Cheeto-in-Chief General Bone Spurs done now? Well, for those who don't know, about 6 days ago, as of recording, apparently the statue of Andrew Jackson at Lafayette Square in Pennsylvania Avenue happened to get vandalized. Now, considering there have been many statues vandalized over the last few weeks, I should probably point out some of the context to a vandalization like this. Andrew Jackson was the 7th president of the United States, but what he is most known for is the founding of the Democratic Party. And while you may think that the Democratic Party at the time was like it is now, where it is the closest thing we have to a left-leaning party in our two-party system, you'd be a bit wrong. See, when Andrew Jackson created the Democratic Party, it was the opposite. This is because pre-Southern strategy, the Democrats and the Republicans were flipped as far as the political spectrum were concerned. In addition to the founding of the Democratic Party, Jackson prospered as a planter, slave owner, and merchant. And you may think that, oh, he's a planter, he just happens to plant crops. That's not what a planter was in the 17th and 18th century. The planter class were also known as the Southern aristocracy. They were the white plantation owners that dominated the agricultural markets through the use of slavery. So Andrew Jackson wasn't just a standard run-of-the-mill white guy with a plantation who happened to have slaves. He was a bit of a ruthless character who happened to use slaves to dominate market capital. This is because the Atlantic slave trade permitted planters access to inexpensive labor for the planting and harvesting of crops such as tobacco, cotton, etc. Their mannerisms were that of the British nobility, and this Southern American aristocracy didn't see their wealth reduced until after the Civil War, where the free labor they had been exploiting to maintain their power finally was taken away. So, if anybody tries to say that he was just a guy with a green thumb who happened to want to make a quick buck, then you can answer with no. He was about as corrupt as any modern-day capitalist that exploits cheap labor from afar, from markets that use everything from indentured servants to child labor. So, hopefully that gives a little context as to why his particular statue may be one that people want to knock down. But here's the thing. Things get a little weirder when you consider the fact that the President of the United States putting out essentially a hit on people is basically what has happened here now. So the United States Park Police Criminal Investigations Major Crimes Unit have put up several flyers. These flyers contain information about the vandalism that occurred, as well as the pictures of individuals who committed the vandalism. Now, mind you that Jackson County Executive Frank White Jr. released a statement shortly after the vandalism occurred, which actually called for its removal. To quote him, "Countless men, women, and children have come through the doors of our courthouses every day. And every day, racism and discrimination are staring them in their face. Statues of Andrew Jackson, our country's 7th president and county's namesake, stand outside 2 of our courthouses, public buildings where we want people to feel welcome. Yet, they are greeted by a man who owned hundreds of slaves, opposed the abolitionist movement, and caused thousands of Native Americans to die when he forced them out of their homeland for white settlement. As long as these statues remain, our words about fairness, justice, and equality will continue to ring hollow for many we serve." According to a release from White's office, he plans to address the issue and recommends removal of the statue, and is going to elaborate more on that Monday morning, which should be around when this video releases. Now, for anybody who wants to say that we should be voting democratically for whether or not these statues can get removed and go through the proper channels in order to get them removed, let me remind you that those proper channels have already failed thousands of people. Here's an example. The Jackson County Prosecutor's Office agreed to pay for plaques for the statue that would detail Jackson's historical role in disenfranchising non-white people after the country legislature voted to add the plaques to the statue in December of 2019. However, the plaques have not been added to the statues yet. The cited reason is COVID-19, but may I remind you that you can social distance as a stonemason, chisel your commissioned work on a plaque, and then, depending on the size of the plaque, use proper equipment to get the plaque onto the statue without coming in direct contact with anyone around you. So while COVID-19 may be a reason that they're using that the statues have not received their due diligence yet, personally, I don't really buy it. So naturally, with all of the BLM protests that have been going on across the country and even across the entire world now, is it any surprise that when the county that many of these residents happen to have lived in for years is failing them after the Democratic vote, county residents would decide that enough is enough and it's time to go ahead and take things into their own hands. At this point, the statue is basically a form of hostile architecture, glorifying the enslavement, the death, and the creation of one of the most racist parties at the time of its building. Do you have something like that outside of your justice building? What kind of justice can any of your minorities even think to have? And so even though it is basically understood that this statue is going to be removed, though any timeline on its removal is up for grabs considering how consistent they were with the plaques, President Donald Trump has decided to take the pictures of every person who was seen vandalizing the statue and post them all over his Twitter. The flyers he is posting read, "The United States Park Police, in conjunction with the FBI Washington Fields Office's Violent Crimes Task Force, is attempting to identify several individuals who are responsible for vandalizing federal property at Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C. Now, I don't think I even have to point out the problem with taking a Violent Crimes Task Force into play here, but I don't have to actually sit in the confines of the flyer to explain why this is a problem. So, for one, the bulletin says itself that it doesn't constitute probable cause of arrest, but that doesn't matter, and here's why. If we look at the numbers, we can see that the amount of hate crimes in the United States has been at a significant increase over the last few years. This coincides almost perfectly with Trump's campaign beginning, since that campaign began in June 16, 2015, and 2015 is also when we started seeing a rise in hate crimes in the US. Now, there is an interesting paper called The Effect of President Trump's Election on Hate Crimes that actually marks and empirically evaluates the data on a correlation between hate crimes and Trump's rise to power. I'm going to be providing a link to the paper in the description. I would hope that you guys would read it as well. But to take a bit from the abstract so that you guys know what you're getting into, using the data from this study, they offer a novel theory that builds on the existing literature on the causes of hate crimes. They hypothesize that it's not just Trump's inflammatory rhetoric throughout the political campaign that caused hate crimes to increase. Rather, they argue that it was Trump's subsequent election as president of the United States that validated all of his hateful rhetoric up to that point in the eyes of perpetrators, fueling this hate crime surge in the US. So when you're a president like Donald Trump and you use fascist rhetoric and appeal to a base, sometimes on the basis of hatred alone, validating bigots' insecurities about minorities and other oppressed groups, what do you, the audience, think is going to happen when that president, who is the rallying cry for things like Charlottesville and people like Richard Spencer, posts the faces of people he deems to be a problem that need to be taken care of on Twitter? For my part, this is one of those things that can easily lead to these people being hunted down, as opposed to just taken through the court system. A court system that, mind you, would effectively be defending a statue that is being taken down anyway. A statue that was not taken care of properly in the first place, and this is a direct response to it not being taken care of properly in the first place. What do you think is going to happen to these people? Now, a couple of them have been arrested, and they're going to go through whatever process we want to run them through right now with our broken justice system, but I'm honestly more worried for the people that don't get arrested, because if they are not properly identified, anybody that looks like them, and of course them themselves, are going to be in danger if they are anywhere in any proximity to Trump's base. Trump's voting base may have diminished a little bit in recent years as people get angry about his response to things like COVID-19, but do remember that for most Trump supporters, they didn't see things like racism, bigotry, possible pedophilia, and fascist rhetoric as deal breakers. If you have somebody like that, emboldened by him, almost being given a call to action by him on Twitter, though of course not in so many words because even he wouldn't be that stupid sometimes. The question isn't just what would happen to the people who so much as look like the Vandals, because that's such a crime. The question then becomes, what kind of America are we living in, and what kind of America have we voted for and created that allowed this to happen? Maybe it's time that Americans start realizing that our country was never great. We've exploited minorities for free and cheap labor, and we still do. We have a two-party system that makes people vote for the lesser of two evils every single time. We invade and destabilize other countries, and then end up having to invade those countries again when the power vacuums we create get too hard to handle, and we've allowed the elites in this country to have so much power that we, the proletariat, are not powerful enough to properly rise up against our own tyrants. And it's gotten so bad where they can do things like put hit lists on Twitter, and significant pushback doesn't reverse this. By putting up a list like this on Twitter, you've essentially ruined somebody's life. How are they going to get a job after this? How are they going to stimulate the economy after this? Because if they look even close to what the people in these pictures look like, you can be sure that, as history has shown time and again, you're going to exacerbate the problem. If you don't want people to commit crime, then do not cultivate the environment that breeds crime. Ostracizing people leads to more crime. Energizing a bigoted voting base that leads to more oppression of minorities inevitably leads to more crime. Deregulating capitalist infrastructure, allowing maximum exploitation of the proletariat, leads to more crime. And instead of cultivating an environment that will actually de-incentivize crime, our president instead goes the authoritarian route. Tweets about running a war on American citizens using the National Guard, about how the police should be more violent, use more force, and every day it seems he's tweeting the same words, law and order, except the kind of law and order that Trump is advocating for doesn't lead to peace. It leads to what's called a negative peace. A peace where the only people who actually get to experience it are those with the privilege to not be affected by the means that are used to enforce it. But that's the thing. Everybody in Trump's base thinks they're the ones that have that privilege. And in many cases, they're right. They want to return back to a 1950s romanticized America. But that romanticized America was a fiction back then, and it's a fiction now. We live in reality. And in this reality, our president has tried to create that fiction by putting out a freaking hit list. So, if you're at the end of this video, let me know in the comment section. Is this your president? Is this your guy? And if so, why? And as always, I'm sorry that I have to keep on tackling political topics like this, but I don't think I can avoid it. I can't bring myself to avoid it, but I hope you guys at least found this informative. And with all that said, I think that's about all the energy I've got in me right now. I haven't announced it as often as I needed to, but I'm gonna try to make a better habit of doing it right now. The people you're seeing on screen right now are my patrons. Everybody who is a $20 and higher patron gets one of these lovely Patreon slides. You get them after you've been a patron for a month, and you get to request the design of the character for the slide. I don't offer as many Patreon rewards as I wish I could. I don't have as much time as I wish I did, but I did want to take this time to acknowledge and thank every single one of you that is a patron of mine. Everybody who is under the $20 mark also makes it into the credits at the end of the video, and I'm trying to figure out a way to reformat those so that they're not quite as small and easier to see. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video and you want to become a patron, you'll end up on that credit wheel or you'll end up in a slide depending on what you do. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and as always everyone, insert end of video tagline here.